Hi, I'm Sophie Lloyd and you're listening to the House Culture Podcast. House Culture.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the House Culture Podcast, hosted by me, the managing editor at House Culture, Matt Rouse. I hope all of you out there are managing to stay safe and sane. Hopefully us at House Culture can deliver some of the goodness from the club into your lockdown life at home. This second season of podcast has been our biggest yet, featuring interviews with legends such as Fatboy Slim and Tall Paul, as well as the Ibizan icon and creative director at Pike's Hotel, Dawn Hindle. However, if those are the only ones that you've heard so far, why not start flicking through season 1, where you'll find episodes featuring the likes of Terry Farley, Greg Wilson, Andy Manston and Sally Rogers from A Man Called Adam. And if you're new to us at House Culture and want to know who we are and what we stand for, we are a collective of house music fans who have come together through our mutual love of the beat to celebrate the spirit of house music. Instagram is our home at houseculture.net, so come and get up close and personal with us and like-minded individuals with no social distancing allowed. Let's get going with this next episode, shall we? This time around we speak to a DJ who specialises in a house music sound that puts a smile on your face, a spring in your step and a stomp in your feet. Something we all need right now, I think. It's Sophie Lloyd. In this chat she tells us what her gateway drug for the scene was.
Pirate radio stations, which I was completely addicted to from the age of about 14. I had about 15 or 20 marked out on my dial at the time. And yeah, I used to just flick between the stations and record tapes from them.
Her unique entry system into the Brighton parties she frequented back in the 90s.
And they used to throw the Big Beat Boutique parties, and I can remember climbing through the window because they used to get so busy, like complete capacity. I can remember being desperate to go and hang out and climbing through the window.
Her reasons for getting behind the decks and becoming a professional DJ.
It was like, oh yeah, I know that track and I really want to play that and I really want to make people dance. I really want to see people dancing. You know, if you can't be a doctor and save lives, then you might as well make people smile on the dance floor.
And what it feels like to get your track signed to one of the most respected labels in house music.
Yeah, I'd quite like to sign your record to Classic if that's okay. And I was like, oh my God. And there's me trying to keep it really cool on the other end of the phone while secretly like jumping up and down with joy.
As you'll hear, whether she's playing in the toilets at Glitterbox or a main stage at a Croatian festival, Sophie always brings the party. I hope you enjoy this one. This is Sophie Lloyd.
House Culture.
Hi Sophie, thanks for inviting us into your home for the House Culture Podcast. It's really appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're well known for playing sets featuring the happiest of house music at parties like Glitterbox, festivals like Lovebox. You're also an artist in your own right, having released tracks on paper recordings and Classic. However, we always like to start at the beginning. How did you first discover the music that you loved?
Probably pirate radio stations, which I was completely addicted to from the age of about 14. Being kind of a teenager, going up to your bedroom and sitting in your bedroom and not having... I lived in the countryside, so in the middle of nowhere. So I didn't have like nightclubs and like, you know, naughty gangs that you used to hang out with, really. So, yeah, but I discovered pirate radio stations. I don't know how, obviously, and was just completely hooked on this music that I hadn't heard before. Because I used to listen to normal radio before that and make, you know, cassette mixtapes and things. So I guess that kind of paved the way to what I'm doing now, but I just didn't realise it at the time.
Yeah, and what kind of year was that you discovered, and what stations were they that you discovered?
So there was Cool FM, Trance FM. Oh my God, what were they all called? Girls FM, but Girls FM was a bit later.
Yeah.
Sorry, the dishwasher's making a noise in the background. Yeah. Oh my God, I had about 15 or 20 marked out on my dial at the time, and yeah, I used to just flick between the stations and record tapes from them. My biggest regret is chucking them in a skip. afterwards, like a few years back when I was having a massive tidy up. I was like, no, what did I just do?
Well, it's so difficult when you find those tapes now. You've got nothing to play them on, I find.
Yeah, I still got a cassette player,
really?
but at my parents' house, not here. So yeah, sorry. The original question was, how did I find it? Get into that kind of music? I guess through pirate radio stations, and just I listened to Kiss when it first became legal, and was hooked. There was Steve Jackson's House That Jack Built show. I don't know if you remember that. I used to love that. And then Colin Dale and Colin Faver.
Yeah.
They had who was it? Colin Faver had the Outer Limits show, didn't he?
Yes.
Which I loved as well. So that was like early techno.
Yeah.
I guess. And Steve Jackson's one was more house. So, yeah.
So on those pirate stations, what was it about them that made you kind of think, this is a scene that I want to get into? Was it just something you had never heard before?
I guess it was music that really excited me because I hadn't heard it. Yeah, it wasn't like the music that was being played on the normal radio, really. So it was just, I mean, the 80s music was really good though, having said that. I'm just trying to think of like 80s tracks to give you an example of now. But I can remember, making tapes with things like New Shoes, I Can't Wait. And, things like those. It was decent pop music, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In the 80s anyway. It's not like the crap that's you can get now on Radio 1, which is like... But then that's probably a generational thing.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it was just different. And the thought of going to a rave when I was 14, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But that's when all the things, the M25 raves going on. Obviously, I was way too young to even go near a nightclub, let alone go to a rave. But I do remember going to my first rave, which was in like a cow barn in somewhere like Crowborough or Tunbridge Wells or something.
And what was that? Were you like, these are my people, this is my home and my church?
I was like, this is amazing. Even though actually that one wasn't very cool. It was just like a few people standing around listening to some really dodgy mixing. But I think a lot of them were. And then I went to Brighton University.
Yeah.
Before I went to Brighton University, I actually did a foundation course in Wimbledon Art College. And we used to go to Club UK a lot, and the Satellite Club in Vauxhall. Yeah. And that was great. So nothing too illegally. Well, there were a few parties actually that I had a boyfriend who lived with a guy who is an engineer he used to work on the Left Field album. Yeah. A guy called Will, who really sadly passed away last year, but he was the kind of entrance to a lot of the kind of parties that we used to go to, and actually still people I know now, like Barry Ashworth from the Dub Pistols and things. Yeah. And they used to have parties on a canal boat thing. Yeah, I can't remember, like hazy memories. But yeah, I mean, these are all when I was like, kind of 16, 17 years old. So yeah.
And so when you went to university in Brighton, what was the scene like there when you arrived? So what kind of year was that?
I think it was about 96.
Okay.
Yeah, 96.
Yeah. So was that on the kind of cusp of like the Big Beat Boutique kind of Skint Records kind of era?
So Big Beat Boutique started in the old Concord, which was opposite Brighton Pier. Yeah. It's now the new Concord is all the way down Marine Parade, but it used to be in a porter cabin, and they used to throw the Big Beat Boutique parties, and I can remember climbing through the window because they used to get so busy, like complete capacity. I can remember being desperate to go and hang out and climbing through the window on a regular basis. They were good. Yeah, good times. I ended up working for Southern Fried Records, but quite a few years later, actually, after graduating from Brighton. But yeah, the Brighton was really, really good fun. And there were lots and lots of raves on the beach in Ovingdean, under the cliffs there, with Positive Sound System. And I used to work for a club called Stomper Funk, doing the door, and I used to go out with one of the DJs who was the resident DJ, a guy called Serge. Yeah. They used to put on a weekly club night, which was brilliant house club night. They used to have people like Lottie and Derek Carter, DJ Heather, Luke Solomon, I'm just trying to think, Ian Pooley. So yeah, all sorts of amazing house people.
Yeah.
So that was a kind of a good grounding in house music as well. Yeah, it was great. Brighton was fun.
Yeah.
I didn't do very well in my degree because
Too much fun.
way too much fun. Like parties on Ditchling Beacon and Ovingdean and God knows where, like in the middle of nowhere every single week.
Yeah.
You know, it was party central.
But then considering what you're kind of doing now, I suppose that was your degree
that was my
in some
education.
sense.
That was my degree. Yeah,
that's how you justify
absolutely.
it.
Completely justified. And so, yeah, it was around that time that I kind of got into DJing. I worked in a pub and saved up for some decks.
So what was it just seeing these guys? Was that the inspiration that...
I mean, I think I knew that I wanted to DJ I didn't want to be a DJ because of like I didn't want to be like the person who was on the stage like with the adulation. It wasn't that. It was the fact that it was like, oh yeah, I know that track and I really want to play that and I really want to make people dance. I really want to see people dancing.
Yeah.
You know, if you can't be a doctor and save lives, then you might as well make people smile on the dance floor. So it's just that kind of thing. And, you know, that was the thing that I was just like, oh, I want to be able to make people have their hands in the air. And so I was just trying to think, I've completely lost the thread of thought. Oh, yeah. So I saved up for some decks and got them. And I used to watch friends at after parties the whole time.
Yeah.
And just go, can I have a go? Can I have a go? Can I have a go? Be that really annoying person.
We've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. And had started obviously buying my own music, but at the time, because I was a student and I was really skint, and I didn't have enough money to buy records, which were like, you know, £8 to £10.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't have that kind of access to spare money as a student. So there used to be the most incredible boot fair in Brighton station car park every Sunday, and obviously I'd be out in a club until silly o'clock in the morning, so I'd go straight from there. I'd either get some sleep or I'd just go there with no sleep and rummage for records, and there would always be mates there also rummaging for records. So it was kind of around that, bearing in mind that was about 1998, around about that time. 798, and that's where I got loads of my disco collection.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what were you rummaging for specifically?
Yeah, so it was definitely an education in the fact that I couldn't afford house records, but I was finding disco records and that the house producers had used samples from. So it was actually a really good education without realizing it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was very much of a lucky dip as well. I didn't know what I was buying, but I was buying like old Sal Soul and Arista Disco and TK Disco records, you know, all the kind of, you know, the proper labels. And I just was buying them because they were on those kind of labels.
Yeah.
And not really knowing necessarily much about the artists then at all.
Yeah, I love those moments where you're listening to something like from that era, and then the sample will just pop up like sun coming through the clouds or something, and like completely lightning on your brain. You're like, oh, holy shit, that's from that.
Yeah, exactly. And you suddenly realise where Daft Punk got all their samples from. You're like, oh! And actually at that time it was very like French house was a really big thing. So there was like Daft Punk, and there was the, you know, Roulet and Cridemore records and the Alan Brack's intro. You know, and then found the record that was, you know, used that sample. And
then suddenly when you play that in a club or to someone else, everyone thinks you're the coolest crate digger.
Yeah, exactly.
Out there.
So yeah, it was quite interesting. So anyway, so that was so I started buying records from there, and occasionally going into real record shops as well, but being very intimidated because I was a girl and it was always very bloke centric, and you'd always get looked at if you were a girl, like, what are you kind of doing in here?
Yeah.
I can remember going, and in fact this is how I became friends with a lot of the kind of Brighton crew, because I went into a record shop in Brighton, which I can't remember what it was called now, but there was a guy called Dave who used to work there, and he was part of the Stomper Funk, and he used to the Stomper Funk crew, and he used to also play for Innerfield a lot. And I can remember going into the shop and just going, "Have you got a record?" And it goes, "I heard it on the weekend," and it goes, "Do do 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 do," and I sang it to him like an absolute tit. And he was just like, "I think I know what you mean. Is it this?" He puts it on, and it's Jeff Mills, The Bells.
Oh, no way, yeah.
You know, the Cat Mo Droopy.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yes, that's it. And so a friendship was forged.
Yeah.
And so that kind of opened a lot of kind of Brighton doors.
So, I mean, for you during that kind of period where you're buying vinyl, you're going out clubbing, is it just Brighton is the scene? And that I'm thinking of that era, there were so many different clubs going on around the country. Were you kind of travelling around and going to other places as well, or was it just purely your scene was on the south coast?
It was Brighton and London mainly, to be honest. It was definitely Brighton centric for about 5 years, but we'd kind of go up for the occasional kind of big event in London. I'm just trying to think what kind of things we used to go to now. My brain has completely gone, because there was Club UK and all that kind of lot, and stuff at Heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel really lucky that I managed to go to a few things. I mean, you know, there were certain things that you think, God, I wish I'd gone to that. Like, you know, things like the Castle Morton. I mean, that looks incredible.
Yeah.
But then, you know, that was a long time ago now, wasn't it?
And it's interesting, sometimes you talk to people. We did a podcast interview with Terry Farley, and he was like, sometimes when people look back, they only take the good bits and the good moments, and when they write the books, they only talk about the good parties. He was like, back in those days, I went to plenty of parties where the music was shit, the sound system was shit, there were no drugs, there, like, everyone was like getting agitated. You know, it's like there's so many nights like that, but people don't remember them.
And in fact, Terry Farley's lots, they did a boys' own party at near one of the in East Grinstead, which is where my parents used to live near by. And that was when I was much younger, so I wouldn't have been able to go, but because I was only probably about 14 then. But I mean, that was a legendary party, apparently.
I suppose, so Brighton, at that point, you're buying vinyl. Are you banging on doors trying to get gigs, or what's the kind of...
Yeah, I was kind of...
What's your angle?
Yeah, so what I was trying to do then... So I was buying vinyl, and at the time I was going out with Serge, who was a resident at Stomper Funk. And so I was just like, oh, I really want to, you know, start DJing. And he was just kind of quite encouraging about it. But he didn't have decks either. He learned on the job.
Okay.
But I saved up and got my decks and was practicing. And anyway, with disco, that's how I learned to mix, because I didn't have any house records. So learning with disco records was obviously even more difficult.
Yeah.
And making my life a lot more difficult. But hey, I did it. And I used to play, like, I used to beg people who I knew who did club nights. I would be like, can I do the back room, like the chill out room, or, you know, whatever, like, to try and do it. So I think the first things I did, there were these nights called Parallel Confusion in Brighton, which they were with Stomper Funk and a breakbeat night, which Crafty Cuts had. It'll come to me.
Yeah. The amount as soon as you put these things in front of people, it's just
yeah, exactly. Your brain goes with the microphone. That's going to really annoy me all day now. But yeah, Parallel Confusion. And so I used to play in the back room, and Serge and I used to play disco records back to back, and sometimes we would do it with Matt Edwards as well, who is now obviously Radio Slave. Yeah. Because Serge and Matt they started Radio Slave together then, back in those days. And Paul Harris as well, Dirty Vegas. Yeah. Like, so it's long kind of friendships forged back from a long time ago, really. Yeah. But having some real fun playing disco records in back rooms, and it kind of took off from there, really. And then when I graduated and came to London, I didn't do any DJing for a while. I just kind of do it as a hobby. Well, I mean, it was still a hobby then. I never got paid.
Yeah.
But then, you know, people would say, oh, it's my birthday, or blah, 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 can you play, etc., as you know, it happens to with every DJ. And then I gradually ended up going into corporate events. I think the first corporate thing I did was for Guinness. It was a party that Guinness were throwing, and I had to play records there. And it just snowballed really. And then I was doing stuff for Selfridges and like loads of fashion brands and booze brands. And I mean, I was really lucky. I had a really good long run of it actually for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, I was kind of working in various different jobs, office jobs that I'd get made redundant or fired from. Because I was useless working in an office, absolutely useless. But yeah, and then worked in a clothes shop, and luckily I had a lovely, flexible boss who would just be like, "Okay, Sophie, you can just don't have to work tomorrow because you're DJing until like 3 a.m. or whatever."
Oh, amazing.
Or like, you know, she was really flexible, and she'd be like, "Last minute, okay, you can go and take this job." So that was really good. And then it all just kind of took off from there.
And it's always been kind of the disco sound that you've enjoyed to play.
Yeah, I think it's because it ended up, you know, obviously because of that beginning bit of like not being able to afford house music and playing disco, but also having just what I could get my hands on of music. But it's just, I don't know, I like all sorts of, you know, all different types of music as well. So it's just, but I think the disco sound.
Yeah, I suppose like your entry into becoming a DJ was wanting to make people happy, and it's got that real kind of happiness factor to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the tracks that you've produced, we can kind of talk about in a moment. But in terms of actually making your own music, was it something that you always wanted to do?
Not really. It was just, you know, there's obviously the disco edit scene, and I thought, I'd like, you know, I think the disco edits became, you know, there's certain tracks that I would love that I thought, I can't mix this in.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did you feel about that when that whole scene kind of started up? Was it like, this is a great moment because I can play all this stuff?
Exactly.
Or was it like, I'm going to get all these people playing this music that only I can mix?
No, it was great, because it was like, that's because there's so many tracks that you just like, I can't mix that, or you end up doing a massive train wreck mix.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really good to be able to have that, and then it just exploded, and now it's just kind of piling through, you know, going through Juno house, the Juno disco chart is just like, wow, it's just edit after edit of the same track, and the same track and the same track, and it's just like, how many times can you use it, Lisa Holloway?
I mean, but sometimes those things are kind of good because you can have 4 different tempo versions of the same track.
Yeah.
So obviously, the disco edit scene kind of blew up. It's happening. Was that the moment you were like, actually, I want to start creating something?
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of did a few. I was encouraged by a friend of mine called Jags Cooner, who's a very well-known music producer.
Yeah.
He works with Primal Scream and, you know, like loads of indie bands. And he was just like, you should get in the studio. And I was like, really? But I'm not like a real DJ. Like, I just do like warm-up slots. I've never been a headline DJ. That's how I felt. It was like, I haven't got any. And also I was just like, but I don't play any instruments. And so what would I know about music production? And then I realised that actually loads of DJs have no musical kind of knowledge really, and there's the ghost production thing. So yeah, that was an eye-opener. But no, I work with a guy called Darren Morris, who's in St Leonard's, and Jags hooks me up with him and said you should work together. He knows about disco sounds. He's very much your kind of sound.
Yeah.
And Darren and I hit it off immediately. And that was probably about 11, 12 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, doing loads of stuff in the studio, and I've got so much stuff that I've never, it just remained on my computer.
Yeah.
And I've never put it out and kind of experimented with edits. So it's only in the last kind of, I'd say 6 or 7 years really, that I kind of started putting stuff out and had the confidence to do it as well.
Yeah. So you kind of played around with edits first, and then
because I was just like, I don't know, like how can I make my own music, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to use samples. I didn't want to be too sample based, because otherwise it's just, I wanted to make music. I think that's how Calling Out came about, really, because I had been doing so much stuff in the studio, which was kind of trying to be something that was like, how do I explain this? So I was working with Darren doing edits, and then I worked with my friend Tom as well at the same time. He'd just lost his best friend really tragically, and Tom is the husband of one of my best friends, and she said, oh, it would be really good to go into the studio with Tom and kind of get him out of his kind of sadness of losing his best friend, just to why don't you make some music together? So we started doing lots of kind of housey stuff, and we ended up working with a guy called Zebra Cats. He's a rapper from New York. So we did that, and I did that under a pseudonym, which was Ripley, and that was before I had my daughter. So that was kind of a foray into house, but it was very much a sound, or that kind of stuff was very different to the thing, the sound that I'm making now, which is more disco. And that was just because it was just like, oh well, making music so that it was along a genre that would sell, or that do you know what I mean, like trying to be cool, and whereas so it didn't feel as natural. Whereas Calling Out, when we did Calling Out in the studio, that kind of came naturally. I was just like, you know what, I've just had my daughter, I was just going back into the studio, and it was just like, am I going to stop DJing altogether and just be a mum and go on a kind of completely different journey, or I'll just do like one last thing of fun. I'm going to have some fun in the studio. And I was listening to gospel music, loads of gospel music at the time. And I was like, oh my God, there's some of this that sounds incredible to be sampled. And it's got so much energy and joy in it. And I mean, all house music comes from gospel music anyway. And I was just like, kind of joining the dots, really. And I found two a cappellas, and Calling Out was born.
I mean, it's such an amazing track. It's so uplifting. So putting that together, I mean, even now there seems to be a whole genre almost of something it could be called like gospel house. There's like quite a lot of tracks kind of going down that route. Do you feel like you own it and have invented it?
Oh my God, no. That, I mean, gospel house has been around for a long time.
Yeah. And once that got signed up to classic, how was that feeling? Was it like, okay, this is suddenly snowballing, and that like, one last time fun in the studio was worth it? Yeah.
I was like, what? Like classic. I used to go to the classic parties all the time.
Yeah.
Like Derek Carter, who was like, started with Luke, one of my favourite DJs of all time, and you just for Luke to go, I'd quite like to sign your record to classic if that's okay. And I was like, oh my God. And there's me trying to keep it really cool on the other end of the phone while secretly like jumping up and down with joy. Yeah.
So that was like, okay, that one last time in the studio was totally worth it. Absolutely banging. It's got a laundry list of great names who have done remixes for it. Even Danny Krivit.
Oh my God.
Did a remix of that. How did that? Just talk to me about
that. Danny Krivit doing a remix. I can't remember if it was Luke or Simon Dunmore or Luke Solomon. One of them went to New York, and I can't remember which one. I think it was Simon, actually, to go for some meetings, and ended up at Danny Krivit's club night, the 718 sessions, and took a video. He goes, oh, by the way, here's Danny playing your record. And I was just like, oh my God, like... wow.
Yeah.
Like, of all the disco people who I would have loved to have had play my record and just kind of acknowledge it, it was Danny Krivit. So I was just like literally like in floods of tears when I got I was just like, oh, and Bay was tiny. She was like, Mummy, why are you crying? Like Mummy's crying with happy tears, Bay. It's okay. So yeah, that was quite amazing. It completely took my breath away. And then Luke followed it up by saying, I thought he's quite up for doing an edit of it if that would be okay. And I was just like, oh my God, yeah.
Play it cool.
Yeah, that would be amazing. No, I don't think I did play it cool then. I think I was just like, oh my god. So yeah, and he came back with that incredible edit, and that's actually the one that I play all the time.
Yeah,
it's such a good edit. Yeah, 10 minutes of it. It's great. Thanks, Danny.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. It was so amazing. And obviously Floor Plan doing an edit, doing 2 remixes, not just 1 but 2 remixes. It's just like, whoa, that was amazing as well, because I was just, I'd played their stuff in DJ sets before anyway, and having, someone of that caliber doing a remix, you're like, they're the originators.
Yeah.
So,
and are you finding that friends of yours are hearing your track, so DJ play it and kind of sharing it with you and being like, I've heard this here, or are you hearing it in random places around that you're going, or who's played it that you've been somewhere and been like?
Do you know what? It's really lovely actually, because I would be getting messages from friends or like video messages, like, oh yeah, I'm here and such is playing your track. Like, I'm at Love International and Midlands playing Calling Out.
Yeah.
Or so many different videos of people playing it. There was an amazing video of, oh my god, I can't remember if it was actually Riva Starr playing it or someone playing the Riva Starr mix of it somewhere in Croatia, but it wasn't the Defected Festival, I can't remember. And it's like this huge crowd and they're all going completely wild. Or there was, I think it was Session Victim last New Year's playing it on, I think it was a New Year's Day party, and the lights had gone up and it was just like, wow, everyone was singing along to it, and I was just like, this is so mad, like it's a bit surreal.
Yeah,
I'm sure it must be for everyone who's ever put music out.
And are you feeling kind of because of the success of these, does it feel like there's a pressure now to deliver?
Yeah. Yeah, the next one's got to be really good. Oh, please let it be good. I was so nervous before Raise Me Up came out. Yeah.
It's fantastic. So obviously Danny Krivit, Pinnacle, Floor Plan,
David Penn, and Riva Starr.
I mean, who
heavyweights, right?
Yeah. Are there any others on the kind of list of heroes that you'd want that would just blow you away?
I don't want to say, because I don't want to jinx it. And for Raise Me Up, I think that was definitely, I mean, Alan, it was only Alan so far who's done a mix of it, and it's so good. In fact, he's done 2 mixes of it, Alan Dixon, and he had his brilliant Bless Me track out earlier on this year, which I've played and played. So I was really thrilled to have him remix it. Yeah. And he's massively up and coming, because he's been doing all sorts of stuff on Gerd Jansen's label, Running Back. Yeah, I mean, the next one, I've been working with a singer called Amy Douglas from New York.
Okay.
Who is incredible. She's been working with the Horse Meat guys a lot. So she features on their album, and I met her earlier on this year as well, when she came to London and sang at Horse Meat Disco, did a live PA there. But she's really incredible. So she's actually written the vocal top line for the next one. So yeah, fingers crossed people will like that. I think they will. I love it. It's similar but different, if you see what I mean.
Okay, I look forward to hearing it.
I can play it to you after this interview.
Cool. Thank you. Cool. And so, do you feel like there's going to be a live element performance if you do enough tracks and get like a back catalogue of success in that, like producing your own things? Would you feel like you'd able to take it on the road?
I would love to, but it's, the Dames have just signed an album deal with Defected, so I think they're probably going to be doing a lot of stuff there with them. To be honest, I don't know. I think it would have to be with that would cost a lot for a label. So I don't know. I think it would just purely be like, if when a track goes massive, then they kind of can afford to fly people over for a live PA. Unfortunately, my singing is relegated as a shower, so there wouldn't be any live stuff from me, that's for sure. But yeah, it's a real privilege to work with such amazing singers, and the Dames are just incredible. I mean, they're such a talent. They've been singing all their lives. They are pure gospel. That's where they learnt how to sing in church, and when I first met them and they came over from Leeds, they performed in Leeds at the church nightclub. And that was the first time they performed Calling Out. So I went up there and met them and they performed it and I was just completely like jaw-dropping. Yeah. Wow, that was incredible.
In that environment as well.
In that environment. It was, and they actually did the video for Calling Out. Some of it was filmed in the church as well. It was absolutely incredible. And it's something that I'm pretty sure will never happen again. It's just, that's the kind of thing that you just dream of all your life, like to see something like that, some people performing your music and being able to be in that environment and seeing people's reactions to it for the first time that they'd heard it as well. So it was awesome. It was an amazing thing. And they're such lovely women, and they on the car journey back from Leeds to London, and they were jet lagged as well. But the driver's Tony Rosano, who drove us, he's also known as the chauffeur. He's also a DJ, and also does edits. And he is a big gospel head. So he was putting on all these gospel records, and the dames were singing along to the gospel records in the car on the way back, and it was just the most incredible car journey. Yeah. As you can imagine, I was like, oh my God, I want to record all of this.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And so apart from mini clubs in cars and, seeing people perform in churches, obviously you've played in clubs and festivals and done all kinds of different things. What kind of environment for you do you prefer to kind of play? Is it small, intimate spaces or massive stages?
No, hate massive stages. Oh, give me the willies. I don't know how anyone does it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done a few massive stages warming up for people.
Yeah.
I did it at Defective Festival in Croatia a couple of years ago. It made me feel sick with nerves before. Luckily, there weren't that many people on when I first started. And then it was really busy by the end of it, but I was just like a rabbit in the headlights. No, I prefer being in like a very much an intimate kind of stage platform, and not on a platform, rather. I don't like having lights on it because it's about the music, it's not about me. And I find actually that that's my main bugbear about the scene at the moment, is with mobile phones and all that kind of thing. It feels like DJing is much more of a performance than it used to be. And when you see DJs and they're like on the mixer, like touching the buttons like it's hot, and it's just like, what is that all about? I'm sorry, but like, are you actually doing anything? I mean, I really don't like being in a spotlight. I like seeing people dance, but I like being kind of on the same level as everyone, and
people just living in the moment, I suppose, like smiling.
Absolutely.
And you've curated a stage at Festival Number 6.
Oh yeah, that was quite a few years ago now. That was when they first started. I think it was, I can't remember if it was, I think it must have been the first year.
How did you approach that in terms of gathering talent and
it was all mates.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, all DJ mates. So it's just like, disco DJs who I knew, and was like, why don't you come up and play at this festival in Wales? It's a really cool stage, and I'm going to get so and such, and they're all going to play as well.
Yeah.
And look, I've managed to get us a camper van, or like a, what are they called? Mobile home.
Yeah.
So we can all have a laugh, and don't worry, I'll get us loads of booze and we can have a party. So it was that kind of like, I know it's not very much money, but will you do it? And it was a great stage. It was like on the seafront.
It's Port Mary. Yeah.
Port Mary. What an incredible view. It was amazing. And actually one year, I can't remember who was playing at the time, and the sun came out on the opposite, because it's in a kind of an inlet, and so you could see the land the other side of the sun came through, and there was a rainbow and it went across. It was amazing.
Like, is that one of those moments where it's like, is this actually happening?
Exactly. And everyone was just like, whoa, man.
Who spiked my drink? And okay, so you've been doing this for a while, and you've already said that you were rummaging for disco records, and that seems to have been the sound that has given you the most success and what you produce your own stuff. Would you say that that's just purely your interest in terms of the sets that you want to play, or there are moments where you're like, actually I'd rather just play 3 hours on a beach bar and just chilled stuff?
I love playing chilled out Balearic stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely love it, because you can just play for hours and hours, and you're not necessarily forced to make people dance.
Yeah,
when it's just like, I think a lot of, certainly club DJing, you've got to play pumpers.
Yeah,
and you've got to keep that momentum. There's so many records that I have got in my collection where they just wouldn't work in a club, or they're just a bit too kind of headsy.
Yep.
And there are certain times you just like, you've got to, there's a certain time and place for those kind of records. So it's really nice to be able to play chilled out Balearic sets.
Yeah.
I've done quite a few kind of Balearic-y edits.
And are there tracks that you've kind of like gathered or got on vinyl and you're like, actually I want to do my own edit of this to play, or you're just like, please someone make a decent edit of it for me?
There's quite a few. I'm just trying to think what I've got in my list. There was something that I thought the other day, actually, and I was like, oh, I really want to edit that. It's just getting the time.
Yeah.
That's the thing. At the moment, I'm trying to just do original stuff.
Yeah.
Purely because it's kind of, I see with disco edits, there's such a massive proliferation of edits.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, there's other people who are really good at it.
Yeah.
Amazing at it, and it's just there's the late night tough guy, and the Reflex and Dimitri from Paris, and all those people who are very, very clever at doing that. Dr. Packer, they're all so clever.
Yeah, and that when you see that name, any of those guys on any edit, it's going to be a decent one.
Exactly. Leo Zero is amazing as well. With his edits. And so there's people who are they're the experts in that field, and it's just like nice. I think more of, if I was going to do an edit, it would be kind of more of a Balearic-y type vibe.
I mean, what's your opinion on, obviously edits and things like that? It's kind of like harking back to reviving kind of classics or making things available to the dance floor for like a new generation. What's your feeling on, do you think that can go too far in terms of nostalgia, or do you think it's good that these tracks are kind of getting a second life?
Oh no, I think it's great that the tracks are getting a second life. I think for the original artist, I don't know, I've got mixed feelings about it in some ways. Like, I think you should credit the original artist in the edit, and it's very difficult because obviously you can't sell an edit because it's a bootleg. So it's a real bugbear if there's no original artist credited on certain edits, and you just think, well, it's a shame because you can't find the original track. I mean, there's been so many edits over the years that I've gone, oh right, okay, the same with the house stuff. When it was just like, oh right, that's that track that it came from. But I think it eventually turns kind of full circle, doesn't it? People find it if they're willing to find it.
There's certainly a few edits that I've got and come across, and I'm like, I've no idea what the original of this track is, and I'll be like furiously Googling the lyrics, trying to find out what the track is, the original.
Ditto.
I mean, so I suppose in terms of like the scene and where it is now, you kind of touched on it with big stages and people maybe with mobile phones and things like that. What's your opinion kind of on the scene in general in terms of people having fun? I mean, example I can think of is I went to the Clockwork Orange event, and some guys I was with, they were like, everyone in here is having so much fun. I felt like one of the youngest people in there. And there
was no mobile phones.
No mobile phones. No. And someone who was with me who still goes out to like the upfront nights now was saying that I would hate going out to like a young night, he called it, because no one dances.
Yeah, I went to the Faith Party about 2-3 months ago, and like you were saying with Clockwork Orange, it's there was no one with mobile phone, and it was great. It was really nice. Everyone was dancing. Everyone was like properly feeling it. And actually, yesterday on Instagram, I noticed Lottie had posted a picture of her DJing in.
Did
you see that?
Yeah.
Exactly. When was it? Like 95 or something.
Yeah.
And it was the joy on everyone's faces, and the fact that they were living within the moment and not worrying. No one's worried about a mobile phone being thrown in their face, or it was kind of probably a quick snapshot from someone on a camera rather than being a professional photographer. And I think every single club night now has a photographer that comes with it, and they just start taking photos of you and taking photos of the crowd. And with kind of current club nights, it feels very much to me that you have to play pumpers for that glitter cannon moment.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's you've got to play right. What you've got to put on a track we're going to put the glitter cannon off now, and we want you to play a track that's going to be good for that with a big breakdown. And it's just like, what happened to having a long set where you can build it, and it kind of goes up and down in peaks and troughs, and it feels like with the big clubs, the big modern current clubs, you can't necessarily do that. And I think that's what people like DJ Harvey and they're so amazing at, is just having those long sets with the peaks and the troughs, and you've got to really think about it, and that's when the crowd sticks with you. And I think with the kind of current club scene, and this is probably my bugbear, is not very much, it's mixing in and out very quickly. Gone are the days of the 10-minute kind of track.
Yeah.
I mean, there are remixes, like Danny Krivett did the 10-minute edit for me, which are amazing. But, it's not often that you can play a track for its whole 10 minutes, for its entirety, because you start to lose people.
Yeah. And
that's sad, I think, because that's why a track is made.
Yeah.
It should be able to take you on a journey, and you shouldn't just have to play the kind of peak bits. And when, with mobile phone culture, it's very much about getting the validation of being in the club rather than being in the moment.
Yeah. I think the further it seems to kind of go, there seems to be kind of a general kind of pushback now, and like more of kind of like, not necessarily an underground, it's probably the wrong word. There's a huge kind of commercial beast that is kind of house music and the big stages and festivals, and everyone's looking for that validation. And now there seems to be more kind of things like you mentioned, Harvey, and things like what Pike's Hotel are doing in Ibiza, like smaller, more intimate parties that are kind of more curated and more headsy, kind of almost like you mentioned, and the opportunity for people to play a 10-minute track and hold a crowd, and hopefully that can kind of develop
sets,
its own scene.
Longer sets, and so you can play longer tracks. It's like if you're booked to play at an hour in a nightclub for a guest slot, I mean, what's the point?
How many
that's 11 tracks.
Is that? Yeah.
It's like, what's the point? Because you don't get any idea of how a DJ is. Either that, or they've got to play kind of 3-minute versions of those tracks and mix in and out, and it's just got to be pumpers. You've got to play pumpers for an hour if you're going to do that, because otherwise, in the general scheme of things, like an hour is to set the scene, really, and you can't do it in an hour. You've just got to play pumpers if you're booked for an hour. I don't like doing that. I like playing long sets.
Yeah. So what's your ideal set length then, if someone was to
about
for kind of housey disco set? What
3 hours?
3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
It's nice. You can just get into it. You can just. I think I ended up playing longer than that. I played at Glitterbox in August, and I think my set there was 2.5 or 3 hours, but it ended up being about 4.5 hours. Desperate for a wee. It was. Ironically, I was DJing in the toilets at Space. At High.
Yeah.
Always call it Space, obviously.
Yeah.
Still, but it was so busy in the room that I was DJing at, and I was trying to get the bouncer who was kind of stood nearish me, and he was trying to kind of herd people around, and I was like, I need a wee. I couldn't get there in time to like him to find an empty cubicle that I could dash into and out of within the space of a record. Because by the time he'd found an empty cubicle, I was like, well, look, I've got still probably got about 3 minutes left on this record. It's not going to be enough.
Yeah. And how terrifying, you're in the cubicle and you can hear the record running out.
Exactly. I was like, no. So yeah. I was like crossing my legs for the last hour of playing there. It's like, oh, yeah.
But I think a lot like longer sets I think are much better for.
Yeah.
I would rather go and see someone. If they're playing for an hour, like you said, they're just going to turn up and just smash it out. And that's sometimes good. And you hear probably the big tracks that you want to hear, but all kind of mashed together.
Yeah.
Like a longer set is, it just lets it breathe. And you feel like the DJ's kind of telling you something or taking you somewhere. I think that's much better. Yeah.
I don't know how Danny Sinaglia does it. Like, he does what, 8-hour sets? I can remember seeing him at Homelands.
Yeah.
Doing 6 or 8 hours.
Yeah, I think he had his own tent at Homelands. Yeah, I think I was at that one.
Yeah, that was amazing. I can remember just being like, I can't wait to see him.
Yeah, what a guy.
Yeah, exactly. But how does he do a wee?
I know, yeah.
Has he got a bottle behind him? That's what I always want to know. Does he wee into a bottle?
You must have. Well, he's playing tracks that are 10 minutes long, I would think, like some kind of tribal proggy bangers. Okay, cool. So I kind of literally just hit the hour mark. So we kind of wrap this up. Yes, so we always get our guests to choose 5 tracks for our Spotify playlist. We do a perfect playlist, and in that playlist there's every single track that each one of our guests has chosen. So someone who listens to this podcast or is a fan of house culture can just whack that playlist on, put it on random, and get a whole breadth of genres and stuff. So we always ask for...
the ones that...
So we always ask first off a catalyst that got you into dance music. You've chosen 2. I did check yesterday, one of those isn't on Spotify, shamefully.
No.
Some Justice, Urban Shakedown
Shut up.
is not on Spotify. I know.
That's really mad. Urban Shakedown, Some Justice, that was the one that was just like, that totally got me into it. Maybe it was because of the sample that it's not on Spotify.
Probably, yeah. But you have got the backup.
Yeah, Liquid Sweet Harmony.
Yeah.
Again, it's just like one of those classics of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was that something you heard on the radio or heard at an event that you went to? Or?
I can remember going into a record shop because my parents lived in a place called Crawley Down, and Crawley had the nearest record shop. And I can remember being about 14 years old and walking into this record shop in Crawley and seeing Liquid Sweet Harmony on vinyl in there and being too scared to go up to the counter with it and buy it because I was so intimidated by it, so I never bought it. I think I bought it years later, quite a few years later, but I can remember at the time when it first came out I was desperate to have it.
It's funny you remember something like that. I do remember going into record shops and seeing records up there that I wanted and being too scared to go to the counter to ask for them.
Because it was so like everyone was really cool in there, and I was just this one like geeky kid who just like, what are you doing in here kind of thing.
All right, I'll leave.
Hi.
Cool. And so second track is we always ask for a floor filler.
Yeah.
What have you chosen?
I have chosen first choice, I Can Show You Better Than I Can Tell You, the Funk D edit.
Yeah.
Which literally every time you put on in a club, everyone goes absolutely bananas.
It's proper bouncy.
It's really bouncy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Funk D is such a good edit remixer.
Yeah.
He's very, very clever.
Yeah.
And obviously first choice, amazing.
And the difference between that and the original is the original is good, but it just elevates. It really pumps it up. Puts in those like offbeat claps. Yeah, it's really, really jumpy. And so what's a Sunsetter? I think.
Sunsetter. Vasco Rossi, Splendida Giornata.
When you emailed that over and that popped up, I love that track. It's
exactly.
so like
so Balearic and
so
lovely.
Balearic,
lush,
and strings like saxophone.
I know, Balearic sax. See, a lot of people have got like a phobia to sax because of like bad sax playing. In fact, Melvo posted a funny tweet the other day from Glitterbox and saying about Balearic sax and how, not about Balearic sax, but about saxophone players in house clubs. Yeah. And how it was just, it was overkill. Yeah. And I agree with him there. But I like Balearic sax. Yeah.
And so a tearjerker, can be non-house music.
Yeah, exactly. Non-house music. It's George Michael, Praying for Time, because George Michael, was a huge Wham fan, huge George Michael fan, and was kind of brought up on Wham and listened to, Listen Without Prejudice, which is the most incredible album, I think, one of the most incredible albums ever. Certainly just, he was just so good at writing pop music.
Yeah.
So clever, proper poetry, and, how to create melodies, and what a clever man.
Yeah, and that voice.
I know.
Obviously, I knew he was good, and when he was alive, he kind of taken for granted in that way. Me and my wife were watching that.
The documentary about him.
Yeah, and there were just bits where he's popping up and just singing on stage, and you're like, this guy, such a loss.
Yeah. Exactly.
What's your favourite Wham song?
Either Everything She Wants, which obviously, but I actually also, oh my God, this is why, when a microphone's in front of you and you forget, bear with me, Wham Rap as well. Enjoy what you do, enjoy what you do. That one.
Yeah.
I played that last year at Bugged Out New Year's Day in the Old Queen's Head.
Yeah.
And everyone was singing along to it. It was really funny. I might play it again this year, actually.
Awesome. Cool. And what was the last one?
The last tune.
Yeah, the last tune. Someone's the crowd are wanting one more. What do you play?
That was a difficult one because it always changes depending on where you are and what kind of mood it is. So it could be a really long edit of something, or it could be something that's a current kind of pumper, or, an old classic.
Yeah.
This one, I just kind of thought, Vanita White Praise Him, the Terence Parker remix, which I think came out about a year and a half ago. And I've been playing it as my kind of last track for, so many sets this year. Just love it.
Do you feel like sometimes there's an expectation in, if you've been playing it for so long as your last track, that you've got to play it, or
no, not at all. It's just purely because I just have that always just is a really good one to end on, and everyone sings along to it. But no, it's not. I don't play that every single last tune.
Yeah.
Because that would be really boring. There's also another one that I really love, which is an edit that a friend of mine did. Of Paul McCartney and Wings' Silly Love Songs.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
Which is a good end of nighter one.
Yeah.
That's but that's kind of more kind of wedding-y.
Yeah.
Or like pub disco rather than a nightclub. But that's a nice one to play. Oh, there's so many. A Frankie Knuckles track or whatever. It's
it just depends on like the
totally
environment, what night you've had. Exactly. What you've heard before. And our final question, I suppose, is always, we are house culture. You are part of house culture, being a DJ, pushing the happiest sounds of house music. What does the whole culture and scene kind of mean to you, and what has it brought to your life? What part do you see yourself playing in it in the future?
It feels like it's consumed all of my kind of from teenage years onwards. It's like being in it's kind of like a family kind of group, I guess, isn't it? Really, for kids nowadays to try and I guess it's a movement, isn't it? Just like anything, and I just feel very grateful to be having been part of that movement. And it's the Jeremy Geller kind of documentary, which very much summed it up, which is it is like a political movement. It's as he explained, it stopped football hooliganism in its tracks back in 1988 with ecstasy, etc. And it's it's like the 60s when the flower power movement and the hippie movement. It's just it's a generation. We grew up with house music, rave music, rave culture, and I feel very, very lucky because now if you're a teenager, I find everything's a bit staged.
Yeah.
It's nothing. We were very lucky, I think, that we grew up in a time where we had that kind of culture of kind of digging for music, and finding out about, you know, whether it was like fashion or music or I guess street culture in general, you know, things like the Face magazine, Sky magazine, Dazed and Confused, and all those kind of things. We were very lucky that we could kind of find it. Now everything is so easily accessible on the internet. There's not so much niche things. I think it's very difficult. There's almost too much now. There's too much choice. But underground, I think we grew up with underground culture. I think that's what it is, isn't it? Underground and rave culture. Yeah. So yeah. So moving forward, I think kids will. I think there's going to be a re-emergence of that. Definitely. I think people are going to stop. I think we've come to a kind of a tipping point now with the internet and with social media, and I think people will start turning their phones off. I hope, and you know, kind of going back to the kind of grassroots of it. Yeah. I hope so. Well,
I think that's a good place to kind of sum it up. Thank you so much.
Sorry, I waffled so much.
No. Don't feel like
House culture.
Thanks for that one, Sophie, and for inviting us into your East London home to record that interview. You make a mean cheese scone, by the way. Wasn't it great to hear about that mid to late 90s Brighton scene? And the fact that she used to climb into Fatboy Slim's Big Beat Boutique through the window? We're really connecting the dance music dots with these episodes in season 2, aren't we? As ever, you can find all of the tracks that we discussed on our playlist on Spotify. Just search for House Culture Perfect Playlist, and there you will not only find Sophie's choices, but a whole smorgasbord of sounds that cover every aspect of dance music, including Sophie's original Catalyst choice, Some Justice by Urban Shakedown, which has recently been added to Spotify. I think it's great that we've now got some proper early 90s breakbeat hardcore business on that playlist. I've also thrown in the epic 10-minute Danny Krivit re-edit of Sophie's Calling Out track, which is an incredible house music journey propelled by perfect pianos and glittering gospel. Once you've signed up to that, please help support the House Culture podcast by loving, liking, tweeting, sharing and rating or reviewing us on Apple. The last bit is really important. Actually does make a difference. So if you say something really nice, I might give you a shout out on the next episode. Which gives me the pleasure of saying hello to Woolmonger, who commented on Apple saying that they have binged every episode and have been schooled in the history of house music in the UK. Thanks for that, Woolmonger. Class is very nearly dismissed. However, if the rest of you want to get those grades, don't forget to hit up our Instagram feed at HouseCultureNet or follow the hashtag TrueHouseCulture. Not only will you be fully informed about the podcast, you'll also be able to share the love for the scene with other partygoers from around the world. And finally, if you want to get in touch with me, Matt Rouse, you can contact me directly on Instagram at DJ Matt Rouse. Thanks for listening, stay safe, and see you next time.
House Culture.